And welcome back to Barry's Poetic Session, the relationship show. I'm your host, Barry, a.k.a. The Dark Knight. And we're just going to get right into it. And with me on my left is the creative Roy. To my right and my better half, Takalani. And the far right is Cami in the house. And we're going to get right into friends and abusive relationships. Let's talk about it. What do you do? Who wants to start?
I can start.
All right, go ahead, Kimmy.
First, I want to start because I don't have a friend in an abusive relationship, but not too long ago, my nephew was staying with me and somebody knocked on the door. I thought it was my neighbor. Come to find out it was a police officer who was saying that to look for a knock on the wall. If my neighbor knocks on the wall, to call the police. Because apparently she's in an abusive relationship.
Wow.
And I heard him talking to my nephew, and then after I heard it, I'm like, well, tell me that I thought it was a person. He's like, it was a police officer. Because I had already told him, I was like, we ain't calling the police. She better leave him. Because that's what I was like. But when he said, no, it was the police, and I was like, and I just was shocked. Though. I'm like, but still, I was like, she need to, if she know he gonna do this, and she need to not let him, first of all, don't let him in. And then two, I don't know how involved we can get in that, because technically I don't even know them. And the guy had already jumped on my nephew at one point in time because he thought I called the police before, and I didn't. So it's just like, I don't even know what to do with that situation. But I will say if I heard something, I would call the police or probably jump in.
That's kind of one of the questions, leads to the question that I have in general. How, as an outsider, can you even define an abusive relationship that you are seeing? How can you recognize it?
I think that's a good way to start is like what people view as abuse is very likely to be different. Some people find some forms of abuse acceptable. I mean, they do. And some people find it unacceptable. So what if, for example, your friend is, I had a family member who her husband told her she was dumb as a fucking monkey in front of all of us. And so my cousin went off like, you ain't about to be talking to my people like that. And it turned out to be an argument with another family member who said that she jumped in their business. Now, the person who said this was also in an abusive relationship. But the thing is like, and the family member whose husband was confronted, she didn't feel like it was a big deal for him to say that. But she also wasn't upset that our family member jumped in. She was just like, oh, that's just how he is. And so it's like, what do you do when you hit that wall? Like, do you just be like, oh, okay, then, I'm done? Like, I mean, I don't know what you're supposed to do, because I had complained to her about the way he talks to her as well. And it was just kind of like, girl, shut up. Like, it ain't that serious.
So let me ask you this then. If it's family versus friends, so if it was your friend that was in that same situation as opposed to a family member, would you have treated it the same way? So if it was one of your best friends as opposed to a family member, would you have thought in the same manner?
I think
that
it
same
depends.
situation.
I think I talk about this all the time. I think it depends on the level of friendship. So like Roy is my bestie, and if I felt like he was being abused, I would feel just as comfortable bringing that up to him as I would somebody who has my DNA. If it were an acquaintance and I don't know a whole lot.
Well, we're going to say friend, not so above acquaintance, but on the friend spectrum. So we're not going to say somebody you barely know, but somebody who's been a friend who you've known for years, whether you're close or not close, but who's definitely a friend.
I'm gonna jump in. I will say that to an acquaintance. Continue.
Okay.
Now,
I'm gonna tell you the truth. I don't know.
okay. Well, I just know, for instance, when there was a shouting match between a man and a woman, instead of trying to jump in, I hit their car alarm to bring attention to the situation. So,
Broke it up.
yeah, so that stopped what was going on there, because then, hey, people are coming out and noticing what's going on all of a sudden. But they were yelling. So I don't know. For me, someone yelling or hitting is then, that's an abusive. So when you get to friends, you see you can get more intimate on terms of what is abusive. But it's blatantly abusive when you see, someone yelling and it's very loud, or someone's hitting somebody. Go ahead.
So that's one of the things, like, when people are talking about recognizing abuse in others at all, even before you initiate the conversation, one of the simplest, easiest way, and the way that we often think of it, is of like violence, right? And most of the time when we're seeing this violence, that's like, oh, then there must be continuation of this somewhere else. I think that's an easy one. It's a nice little layup that you can see, but it also gets a little confusing, because the violence that you're seeing is not necessarily the violence that happens all the time. And and even though statistically speaking and all the rest of this stuff, male abuse of female partners leads to more injuries and all the rest of stuff. There is females who abuse males, and also mixed in other kind of relationships where you see violence outwardly, but then back home there's like a different set of violence.
Yeah.
But that's a different thing of like, that's bringing up a different aspect was that I run into when talking to people who are in an abusive relationship, is that sometimes I have to go with them and say like, look, I see this person is doing this to you, but you are also doing this to them. I'm not saying that's healthy, and I'm not saying that you're the cause of it, but you realize that you got to work on you, because it's not that, I'm not saying that's provoking it. I'm not saying that that's even revenge. I'm saying like, that's just adding to the situation. It's not a healthy situation, and you're causing problems too. And that's one of the harder things when you're talking about approaching with somebody with abusive things, is that like, we tend to imagine that there's always just one side that does all the giving and one that does all the receiving. And whereas that happens, I'm not saying that that's not true, but
No, I definitely understand what you're saying, where it said, I'm not a victim, I'm giving as much as I get.
Right.
And that, for somebody saying something like that. So I've seen that, or hey, my parents were doing that, but I'm not like them. But you've escalated where only one person was getting the bulk of it. Now both of you are going at it like it's a war, as opposed to not having a war and having peace.
And then de-escalate, just escalate.
Yeah.
And me being from inside a relationship that was abusive, and watching friends inside relationships, so I've been on both sides of that. I'm trying to deal with it myself, bring people into it for help, and trying to dig into other people's for help. But just like you said, first you gotta identify the situation, and you gotta, the other person has to, I can't say anything to somebody that hasn't accepted that that's actually happening. They have to see it for what it is as well. And then it's like you said, sometimes they have to, I guess they have to be a willing participant in it to even be able to say anything to them. Because some people, you're not going to be able to say something to them about it. It's just, they don't, they don't receive that type of information like that. Or some people, they talk about like when you're in an abusive relationship, how some people, I guess, mentally feel like they're taking it in. So they feel like, I guess some people feel like they're supposed to be in a relationship like that. And those people are the ones that you really ain't gonna never be able to even get them to see that side of it.
So it's basically helping somebody that wants to be helped in in an abusive situation. Sometimes where it's so, where it's, I guess, where the person doesn't see it, you can't necessarily help them outright directly, because you can only help those who want to be helped. It's similar to like a drug addict. Unless the drug addict actually wants to stop doing drugs, you're not going to be able to help that drug addict. The abusive relationship, you know, you have to give the person what they want. And what they need and what they want are usually not the same. So if somebody wants to be in a relationship that's not necessarily good from what we see, we can't change their minds simply by stating it if they are aware of the situation themselves. Now, sometimes they're not aware, but most times they are aware, and they're like, look, I like passion, or I like something that's more extreme than what we are used to.
That's the passion phrase. Oh my gosh.
Don't you hate that?
That's, oh my gosh.
So you, at some point, you know, because when you try to get into domestic violence, who gets hurt more? And when you try to break up something, it's the person who tried to break it up gets attacked.
Well, I think I'd like to share my own personal experience with abuse. I was dating a guy when I was like 18, 19 years old. Most of the people in my family were either in abusive relationships or were just coming out of abusive relationships. There was a lot of abusive relationships that I grew up seeing, being around, hearing about. And to tell you the truth, I thought that was normal. I thought that when you got upset with somebody, you hit them to express your anger because you're mad. And then I thought you made amends somehow. You make them their favorite dinner, you buy them a gift, or, say, how profusely sorry you are and that you really love them. Like, I really thought that that was okay and that everybody did that. And so when I got into a relationship like that myself, one of my very close friends told me, dude is abusing you. And she would not shut up about it. And I was just like, oh, well, he said that we're play fighting. This isn't real. We're play fighting. She was like, he threw you into some sliding closet doors and they broke. That is not fucking playing. And I just, and I'm gonna tell you the truth, when she first started saying that, I'm like, what is she tripping about? Like, this is what people do. It wasn't until I started hanging around people who were more positive in their relationships that I started to see some type of flaw in it. I thought this is what people do. And to me, like, abuse didn't really occur unless you were in the hospital. Like, if you got put in the hospital, that was real abuse. But if somebody slapped you, push you, call you out your name, that's just normal relationship stuff. This is what people do. I truly thought that that was normal. So I think psychologically speaking, we have to think about where that person is in that process. Are they even at a point where they think this is abnormal? And if this is something they grew up with, something that these are relationships that they not just maybe in their household, but what about like people they grew up around? How many people have seen their uncle go upside auntie's head? And then it's like, okay, well, this is how we deal with our anger. This is normal.
So so there was something that was said that you got to it first, but about that whole thing of like, you can't approach them when they aren't ready. Like, approach them when they aren't ready if you feel compelled to, because sometimes you need someone to provide that sense of daylight. Like, I know that this is your standard, but this is my standard. And like, and there's been times that a relationship has ended, that just a friendship that or acquaintanceship has ended because I brought that up to someone. Said like, I see the way they are treating you. This is what I see. I don't like it. And then they will come back to me and say like, you know what? You're trying to interfere. They don't really like it. They shell up and they don't talk to me anymore or whatever. And I'm just like, I said what I said, and I hope that later on in your life, you'll hear enough of that to realize this isn't really the way it should be. But due to my degree of empathy, I can't really sit there and watch someone go through that without feeling compelled to say something. And also I want to change one of the examples that people often talk about, like a married couple, as a demonstration of abusive, like conditioning a person to know how to how to interact with people. But like, you don't necessarily have to have abusive parents. You could have abusive siblings. You could have abusive friends that have taught you the same behavior. And it's this, so don't just say like, oh, we can't have so-and-so around because this one older parental figure is mean or sexually creepy or whatever, when they've got their own siblings doing things, or their cousins doing things, or the friend across the street who's just a little bit older doing things. So
Influences come from everywhere.
right, the best ways, right, exactly. And so, but one of the things about the abusive situation, like growing up in an abusive situation, is that sense of isolation, that sense of like, I live in a world that other people can't understand. Like you were talking about how like you thought that this was how people acted. And like, meanwhile, I grew up in a world where like, this is a special thing that other people can't understand. And I know a world that others can't see and that kind of stuff. And so like when I was introduced into other people's, like when I was meeting other people's lives and the way they interacted with their parents and all the rest of that stuff, I got to see examples of how I wasn't living. And some of them were abusive as well. And so that kind of reinforced like, oh, I'm not experiencing that. I'm experiencing this. But like that exposure to daylight and that connection and sense of community removed the isolation from me eventually, and I was able to relate more to it. Now, that's just me and doing my internal journey. And that, circling back to my original point, that still to me is part of the reason why, even if they aren't ready, finding some way to plant that and say like, maybe this ain't right. And
Well, I will say that, in my situation, the good friend that I told you guys about that would not shut up about it. She got to the point where she screamed and cried, and she was like, I'm afraid that he's going to kill you. And she was like, I can't be friends with you anymore because I can't do this. She was like, I am in fear every single day that he's going to kill you. And I refuse to sit around and watch it happen. And it clicked in me like, and the thing is, she was a very even-tempered person. So to see her get that emotional, I'm like, well, maybe it is something I'm missing. Like if she is getting this riled up about it, maybe there is something that I'm missing. And so one day we were play fighting, and two of his male friends were there, and they grabbed him and roughed him up. Like, no, you cannot be doing this to her. And I'm sitting there picking myself up off the floor like, we're just playing. They was like, no. And he was like, okay, look, I'm sorry. He was like, I'm gonna walk her home. They was like, no, we gonna walk her home. So I got to see people who were saying, no, this is wrong. You can't be doing this to her. And it's like, wow, like, okay, so this ain't normal. And I also hit people too. I hit him. I hit a couple of other boyfriends after him because it wasn't out my system yet. It wasn't clear to me that this was not okay and that this wasn't healthy. It took some years to kind of get to that point. And Mary and I had an argument one time, and he slapped the table because he was mad. And I instantly knuckled up. Barry had never laid a hand on me. But in that moment, in the things that I have seen in my life, to me, that was, okay, he's about to fight you. And I remember seeing his hand slap the table and looking at how big his hand was. And I'm like, if he punched me in my face, something's gonna be broken. And so my biggest thing was, okay, you gotta protect yourself. And he looked so surprised that I would do that, and it had been years since I had felt that was normal and all that stuff, but it was just instinct. Okay, if a man is mad at me, they're gonna hit me. They're not gonna just maybe yell, or they're not just gonna say, you pissed me out for whatever. They are going to hit you that automatically.
Well, I've never let go of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know all men ain't the same, but I still know some are. So that's always in the front of my brain.
You always have that wall. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
You
all-
prepare to be injured somehow if a man is mad. And like he and I talked about it and talked about what my triggers were, but I just didn't even think that was a trigger until it happened. And this was years after I had came to the realization like that wasn't healthy. You can trust people. Well, I thought you could trust him not to hit you, and a couple of boyfriends before that, I'm like, I could trust them not to hit me. And then in that moment, I was shook. And I'm trained in martial arts. And the thing about it is that even if you're trained in martial arts, when you are hit with something that is triggering, it gives you pause.
Yeah, it takes you back to that point. It doesn't. So whatever your reflex is from that point is what it's about, as opposed to
You can't even form a strategy because
you just go on
frozen.
instinct and whatever it is that you're reliving.
Back to survival mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're trying to survive.
I gotta survive.
And yeah, and so it's a lot of times you're trying to de-escalate things as a friend or what have you, but not everything can be de-escalated. And when you, like I said, when you try to jump into something, whether verbally or not, you get attacked. Like
Yeah.
when somebody's saying something bad about a relationship of a friend, it's not taken like, oh, my friend is looking out for me, unless that person has already been like, well, I think they've been cheating and they ask you. But if you're giving unsolicited attention to something,
Observation,
attention to something, then you're going to get pushback a lot of times.
And
When
every single time I brought it up to somebody, they shut me down.
I
Every
think in
single
my
time.
situation, it was I was shutting people out. I knew immediately I wasn't right. I didn't grow up like that. I didn't see anything like that. I was always told not to. I grew up in foster homes, so they was always, you weren't supposed to be putting your hands on people.
Right.
And such and such and such. So I knew instantly, but my situation, when I ran away and got married when I was 17. So I was in foster home, so I basically took myself out of the system.
Right.
I remember with the court, they gave him, I'm not gonna say custody, but they gave me, they emancipated me. So I was basically out for my own. But me not realizing I had put myself in the hands of a madman, and there was nowhere else to go. So I was in a situation where I knew it wasn't right, but I had secluded myself away from everybody. I ran away. So I had already left from everything. Friends in school, they had went off and started going to college. I was married and starting to have kids. I had distanced myself from my family and stuff because at the time when I had went on a run, I had to stay hidden for like a month or two. So I was, I had that time period. And then once I got married, he had never put his hands on me. Nothing ever came about nothing until that first weekend we got married, he slapped me. And come to find out, he had been raised that men were allowed to slap women. This is what him and his brothers had been told. His dad did his mother like that, and it was nothing I had seen coming up to it. So I didn't even, but I knew instantly. I was like, oh, this ain't not where. But I also didn't know where I was supposed to be going. So when people came to me telling me stuff, and it was actually his brother, wife, who was the one who was always in my ear because she was going through it with his brother, but she wasn't the type she was a fighter, and he was trying to abuse her. That he was getting in fights. And she was the one always in my ear, like, no, this can't be going on, But my struggle was, I knew that I didn't want to be here. I just didn't know where to go. And I didn't trust anybody around me to be the people to lean on because I didn't know any of them like that. So I was in my situation longer just because I didn't feel like I had anywhere else to go.
And once again, like you talked about, that isolation, that's for an abuser, the isolation is key to controlling the situation in their mind. And when you try to get away, not only is it one of the most dangerous periods for you, but it's also one of the scariest periods because you don't know what to do next without some instruction. And that's why we should put up for if you are in a domestic violence or in an abusive situation, you should contact the number on the screen. And this is Barry's Poetic Session Relationship Show, and we'll take a break and we'll be right back after these messages.
This is Takalani, and aside from being a panelist on Barry's Poetic Session, the relationship show, I am also a weight stigma researcher. My primary interests are in the intersection between weight stigma, race, gender, and mental and physical health outcomes. For information on my academic studies, you can follow me on Twitter at this handle here. Thank you for watching Barry's Poetic Session, the relationship show.
And we're back to Barry's Poetic Session, the relationship show, and we're going to get back with when friends are in an abusive relationship, what do you do, and how can you be supportive? What do you think about support when you have such a situation?
Well, one of the things that, going back to the idea of how you recognize and all the rest of stuff, one of the things that happens when you are in one of those relationships is there's often this sense of blame. Like we have some examples where one person was saying that they grew up like this, they didn't know it was different. We have another example where like, I grew up knowing this was wrong and I'm still in it. So it's not really like, it's your fault. It's your fault you got into it. You got it, so that sense, that sense of like, that isolation that the abuser places on them is exaggerated by people who are saying you choose to do it anyway. And so when we talk about assisting or reaching out to people who are in that situation, one of the things that greater society does wrong is just wag their finger in their face. And
She stayed, so she must like it.
right, she stayed, so she must like it, or he stayed paying her bills even though she was taking advantage of him, or you're still putting out when you're being requested to, and so like you must like it. That's if there even is an element below it, that's not the right element to talk about, because the arrangement is not one that is healthy or functional in a way that's going to be good. So like that's the thing. We're taking that like you observe the abuse. One of the things is remove that language of like it's your fault. And
Number one. And number two, just simply saying you should leave is not good advice either, because like I said before, that's one of the most dangerous times is when the person tries to leave and you have more injuries and fatalities from those situations. So
I don't realize it's not that
yeah,
simple to
Right.
just leave.
yeah, it's not.
It seems like it's that simple. It's not that simple.
It's never that simple. And the person isolating, the person that's being isolated is sometimes isolating on themselves, knowing that they don't want their friends involved in the situation either. What they feel may be making it worse for them or less comfortable, and they don't have a way out. So being supportive, you have to be understanding that, hey, they don't want that stigma, but they also are fearful of, hey, letting more people know is dangerous.
And I think that, I think that what people don't tend to understand about abuse, particularly in domestic partnerships, is that there's a grooming period. Just like there's a grooming period with sexual child abuse, it's the same thing in a relationship between an adult abuser and adult victim. And what that does is it changes you. They mold you psychologically. So just getting up and leaving, that's the physical part. You got to deal with the mental part first. The mental part is what activates you getting into the physical mode of leaving. If that mental is not there, if you feel unsafe leaving, if you feel like if I leave, he's going to kill me, you're going to choose life. even if that life is miserable, it is instinct to try to preserve your life. And I think so many people miss the fact that this is also psychological. This is not just a physical thing. And even the abuse itself, Roy talked about this before, it's not just as simple as somebody slapped me. It's not that simple. There may be like when you said that he had never laid a hand on you in the beginning. It was the same thing with me. Love bombing, like no other. And the thing is like they get you into this feeling that you're safe and secure, and they are the only ones that can make you feel that way. Nobody else can. So you sitting up here thinking you're gonna
They hold your
leave.
security in their hand.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're only secure with them. You can't be with or without them, because like you said, when you go through that moldy mode, your whole existence is set up into this type of, I want to say, culture. It's like a culture around this environment, and you got to leave the whole culture.
Yep.
And it's hard to, not only that, you got to leave it. You got your friends you're trying to take with you. You got kids you're trying to take with you. And then you're trying to leave this person behind that's still trying to follow you. It's not easy as people think it is. And then once you leave out, because you got these people over here that's like, you need to leave, you need to leave, you need to leave. Now you pick up your stuff and you leave, and they done went on.
Right.
This person over here still following you. They still trying
And
to
they
figure out
ain't gonna
back.
let you stay with them.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the grooming process of friends and family, like, hey, this is a good person. They only see the outside, they don't see the inside. Like, hey, why leave? Or the person's like, shoot, I would take them. And it's like they don't even realize that it's been a situation of, say, like a magician misdirection.
Go ahead. I just want to take a side note about isolation. When it's talked about isolation, it's often imagined that it's like they locked their victim in a tower and they don't interact with people. But that's not necessarily the isolation. The isolation can manifest in the fact that you speak at a different bandwidth with the people who are around you versus at home. Now, granted, the relationship that you have with your intimate partners or your siblings or your parents, like is different. But like if you find yourself not telling the story because you are afraid of how people will start interfering with your life. Like I dated someone who was only happy when I was going broke, paying for her things, taking care of her, making sure that like that was the only way that was the only affection that would be there. Why would I say that to anybody? But I was still hanging out with my friends. I was still going out and going to my family events and all the rest of stuff. So I wasn't isolating. I just was isolating because they were the only ones who really understood me. So I just want to throw that side note in. It's isolation is not just being locked in a tower. It's also.
So when you say isolation, it's more of you feel alone if you try to leave, and it's not about the people around you. The people may see the outside and don't know, like I said, what's on the inside. So
It's that culture that part.
Right, it's like culture of events. That's that sense of security, like you're only safe with me or you only deserve me, that what you were alluding to.
yeah,
And I think too that one thing that we should talk about is offering actual solutions. So like in situations where the friend is like, I think that something is going on, whatever, and like we was talking about, people saying, oh, just leave them, but you ain't gonna let me stay at your house. Like, so what are some actual solutions that you have? Do you give them a number to a shelter? Do you say, hey, if you come, I'll let you stay with me for 30 days?
Me personally, dealing with things that I wouldn't care if I had to sleep on my own couch. I always, because again, me being in a situation and knowing what I wanted or what I would have needed, anytime I always said, well, I ain't gonna say nothing to you, but the door's always open. Whenever you can get away and you want to leave, I got a place for you to go. If my house is crowded, we'll find you another place. But I always tell them, when you ready to leave, leave. we'll figure out what to do after that. You know what I'm saying? I always leave a hand out there for them because I'm not gonna keep bugging you because I know people don't want to get bugged, and eventually they'll just stop talking. I'm one of those people. I'll just stop talking to you because it's embarrassing. I don't want to keep talking about it. I don't want you calling me stupid and stuff like that. So I'll just leave it alone. So me knowing what I'll do, I just throw it out there. Listen, I see.
And the thing that finally ended it for me and that guy was not my friend having that emotional reaction. We went through a period where we didn't talk because I refused to see. It did kind of shock me, and it did make me think like, something's going on here. He went to jail. I had no choice but to move on and seek out healthier relationships. If that hadn't happened, I don't know what would have happened. And I'll tell y'all something too. I got pregnant by this guy. And when he went to jail, I was like, I don't know what I would do. Like, I was afraid to tell my parents and all of that. I was still living with my parents. I was in my first year of college and I had an abortion. This is why, and I beat myself up about it, went through years of therapy about that. But the point is, and I'm just go ahead and get on my soapbox about this right now. The right to choose is very important. If I had that baby by him, that baby would have tied me to him. That baby would have tied me to him, and I would have felt obligated to stay in that situation, take my child to jail to see him, be waiting for him when he got out, and then prepare for that ass whooping every day. And who knows, he might start beating the child too. I don't know. But that would have been such an ugly situation, and I would have felt trapped, and I would have felt like there was nothing that I could do because I got this child to take care of with him, so I hate to say it like this, but I wound up being kind of lucky in that I had the options available to me to get out of this relationship. I wasn't living with him, and then he went to jail, so that allowed me time to get my life together.
So my question to you is, what finally made it change that this was not okay? Because your friend, the situation, that still didn't make it that it's not right or okay. So what finally changed?
It was not one moment in time. It was a slow progression of just different people, events, letting me know this ain't right. This is not the life that you're supposed to have. It was just over and over again hearing, so like Roy was saying about planting the seed, they might get mad at you, they might, or like Cami was saying, I ain't gonna say nothing, but if you need to come here, you can. Something like that. It may not click that first time. It may not click that first year. It may not click that first couple years. But at some point, somebody else is gonna bring it up. They're gonna revert back to that in their head. That next hit is like, well, damn, I remember that Roy said he didn't like this. Or I do remember that Cami said I could come sleep on her couch. So it wasn't like one event like, oh yeah, no, it was it was like eroding a rock. It was just slow.
I just imagine when you said, oh yeah, I just imagine Kool-Aid Man busted through the wall with like, that's abuse.
Oh yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah, but I was going to say that it does take time. Like I said, when the person wants help, that's when you're able to be more helpful to the person directly. And like you said, planting the seeds is all you can do when they're not ready.
I want to say something.
Go ahead.
In the same instance, though, we also got to be careful of some people's. It's like your approach to situations. Some people approach stuff real aggressively. That's not gonna go with somebody's personality that's not like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
My sister, y'all know my sister. Greta is very, she's out and she's going straight to it. And I'm kind of like, I'm gonna wait over here and see what's going on. And so like, that's one of the things, like Greta's one of the people, like, I want to talk to my sister about certain stuff, but she's so aggressive with it. She's like, we gotta do this, and I'm kind of like, be like that, like I want to.
She's confrontational and you're not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
I get it.
I always want people to take that in consideration too when you're going into the situation. Who are you dealing with? Are you dealing with the type of person that's gonna go out there? Because again, I wanted to be out of the situation, but that way I would have kept avoiding that person. I don't want to do that. I don't, you know what I'm saying? That's not my approach.
It's a fine dance. Like it's not one single way to approach a person. It's not one single way, one single reaction that's gonna happen. Like it is so complex. All these layers of abuse are very, very complex. And I think that people think it's just very straightforward. Bam. You saw a TV show on Lifetime and they said it's wrong, so why you still there? Bam, I said it's wrong and you still there. I ain't offer you no solution, but I said, it's wrong, you still there. Bam, you leave. And it's not
Very individualized.
So one of the things, so to that effect, one of the ways that I approach dealing with, like figuring out how to interact with someone who I see is in an abusive situation, or it might just be some one-off that or whatever. Like that's it. Is that I have to actually be selfish, and that's one of the things that sounds really weird. Is that like I'm reacting out of empathy because I'm concerned for their safety or their trajectory in life. But in the same vein, I have to think selfishly because if I say something that like I knew a kid. They were growing up. Back when they were 16, they were in a friendship that was abusive. And I could see that. And they were just happy-go-lucky stuck in it. And I was like, hey, this is not really the best thing for you to be in. Or I just gave them an example as an older adult, like, this is how you become friends. This is how you do it. But like that was safe because on the other side of their friend who ended up hating me and resenting resenting them later, they weren't going to show up and shoot me. But in other examples where there's been some ruckus up in an apartment upstairs, so I'm calling the cops on them, they might.
Yeah.
And they did come back. Sometimes that's come up and they threaten you, stay out of my business. Or even the victim of that has come to me and said, like, why are you calling the cops when it's just me and him and all the rest of stuff? And I was like, I called the cops because it was 2 a.m. Y'all needed to shut up. Like, be quieter, please. Like, if you like, it was just, but that's the thing is that I had to come from because as you're noting, the persons who are you talking to are also diverse and varied. The approach of the solution should be something that you are comfortable with and that you can live with. Because one other example, which is a form of abuse, but we're talking about more of a repetitive and intimate abuse. There was the incident in Portland years ago where there was some white supremacist or somebody who's just riling up some stuff, picking on a teenage Muslim girl. And these two white hero guys got up and to defend her, like saying like, hey, you need to stay out of that. And the abuser whipped out a knife and killed them both. And so like, you have to consider that even if you want to help people, you have to weigh how far you want to go. Because there was one more incident that I was in my apartment and there was this guy that was wandering around the neighborhood that everyone knew as a not necessarily a troublemaker, but somebody who was this kind of like floating spirit throughout the city, but was mercurial in attitude. And one day he burst into the foyer of my apartment, banging on my door, saying that he needed help because he was stabbed. He was cut. And I was like, knowing he's out there playing and all the rest of the stuff, like, what am I supposed to do with this situation? Because I could open the door and let him in, but I also know his personality. Like, I let him in and he's cool and all the rest of the stuff, but he's one of those scammer schemers kind of things. And then also, he was safe inside the foyer, so like all he needed to do was just lock the door and it wouldn't matter. And he turned out fine, but like that was a paralyzing moment. Like I couldn't find a good solution for that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess abuse, like you said, comes in many forms. I know, shout out to my cousin who was in Virginia. She was, took her belt off and tried to tourniquet around somebody who got shot, who just stumbled in her doorway because he was, just a bad situation that got worse. And now, I guess the shooter already left, so she wasn't in danger in that way anymore. Just now is trying to save a life. But you got to be mindful of, hey, when somebody's mad at somebody, how they react, you're not going to know. When you see passion, people stabbed several times or beaten up by hands or, just random shooting and people get, the person that's, when you have a gun and somebody is shooting out of anger or they call it passion, the person that they're trying to shoot a lot of times isn't the person who gets hit, it's the people around. Not necessarily the people around, just the people around. The random person who was watching, hey, what's going on, boom, gets hit, as opposed to the person who was actually being sought after. So you have to be mindful of your surroundings and your situation.
Yeah, I think that's another thing too. Like you have to think about what your safety may be in that situation. If this is somebody who, has an arsenal of guns, I know one of the abusers in my family had guns. So, I could see somebody saying, I'm not gonna say nothing to him. Like, he got like 6 guns in the house, 2 of them being rifles. Like, ain't nobody gonna mess with that.
My second situation was very much more like that. A lot of people, nobody would give me any type of assistance because he was so, nobody knew what he was gonna do. Everybody was always scared of what he was gonna do. He's from Jamaica too. So it was always that question, is he even gonna be here to get dealt with if something did happen? And of course he was always one of the type that fly off the handle and talk real good. So a lot of people constantly was like, yeah, I ain't coming over there, yo, kid's daddy over there. And it was like, that was just it. Like, nah, we can't do nothing because he gonna be over there. And that was just the end of the question. So, but I also knew I knew, the concern, what they were talking about. So, and even me, it was certain situations I didn't bring people in or because you never know. Like I said, the situations, individuals, you never know who's gonna do what, which type of way. I had my one friend that was in a relationship, in an abusive relationship. We were both in a relationship, and we were basically in an abusive relationship at the same time. And she called me like, I think 2:00 in the morning, like, come and get it. And I'm thinking, okay, it's it. Finally, I'm going to get it. She ready. That call came. I'm going to get her. And then she didn't come outside. And I was like, I gotta go back home. It's 2:00 in the morning. Now I gotta explain to him what I was doing out 2:00 in the morning. And I remember just being, I shut down on what she was going through because I realized I had to go back and I gotta figure out how to get back in the house. And it was just like that loop that you just don't know what's going on at different times. It worked out fine, but I also realized she couldn't make that phone call to me again. I can't get up and go 2:00 in the morning if you're ready to go again. I'm not gonna be able to go. So, and I remember that night just being worried, what was he gonna do to her? What was gonna happen to me? When I got back, it was a whole loophole, 360 of what was gonna go on. So.
Yeah. And like you said, the neighbor thing, like if, sometimes you try to go to the neighbor and they said, I'm not going to do it. The neighbor would be like, I can't help you. And a lot of times you have to find and make a plan and just know that plan may change. And so I want to thank everybody who's come out today. I want to thank Cami, Takalani, Creative Roy, and again, I'm Barry, a.k.a. The Dark Knight, and we will see you next time on Barry's Poetic Session Relationship Show.